Bear News Reality. Cut through the noise. See what's really happening. No spin, no script. Just facts and fire.
Welcome back to Bear News Reality. This program contains news reporting, analysis, and commentary intended for informational and educational purposes. We do not promote harm, violence, or illegal activity. Our goal is to explain events, examine impact, and hold systems accountable. In today's episode, we are pulling back the curtain on the Board of Peace, a title that is as hollow as it is deceptive. We aren't just looking at a committee, we are looking at a global syndicate of greed. In this episode, we are going to talk about who is in, who is sidelined, and why this board represents one of the most dangerous shifts in world power we have ever seen. This isn't just about a ceasefire in Gaza. It's about a new, privatized global order where peace is treated like a development project and stability is sold to the highest bidder. And it all started at Davos, where Donald Trump unveiled the Board of Peace not as a diplomatic framework, but as a sales pitch driven by grievance and ego. He openly attacked NATO, labeled longtime allies as freeloaders, and made it clear that if they wouldn't submit to his vision, he would simply replace them. But speeches are cheap. What matters is structure, and the structure of the Board of Peace is where the real danger lives. Trump did not design this board to function like an international body. He designed it like a corporation. The charter places him at the top as permanent head of the organization, a role that is not tied to any elected office. There are no term limits. There is no public accountability. Removal is only possible through internal mechanisms controlled by the same members he personally selects. In other words, power without expiration. This is not a continuation of American leadership. It is a transfer of power from democratic institutions into a private framework. Even if Trump leaves the presidency, this board remains intact. The authority does not reset. The influence does not diminish. The decision-making moves from Washington into a private estate in Florida, insulated from voters, courts, and Congress. Nowhere is that clearer than in the plan to rebrand Gaza into what they are openly calling New Gaza. This isn't reconstruction. This is erasure. At Davos, Jared Kushner presented AI-generated renderings of luxury towers, marinas, and resort infrastructure along the Gaza coastline. Not housing for displaced families, not hospitals or schools, high-end tourism zones and elite residential developments. New Gaza is a branding exercise meant to make the original Gaza and its people disappear from the future entirely. This is what the Board of Peace actually does. It reframes devastation as opportunity. Conflict becomes a distressed asset. Human suffering becomes a development window. That perspective is reinforced by who sits on the board. This is not a table filled with diplomats or humanitarian leaders. It is dominated by private equity executives, real estate lawyers, and financial operators. Mark Rowan of Apollo Global Management, Steve Witkoff as a special envoy, Yakir Gabay. These are not peace negotiators. These are deal makers. When they talk about stability, they're talking about investment certainty. When they talk about rebuilding, they're talking about return on capital. When real estate lawyers write a peace charter, you don't get treaties, you get leases. Now look at who joined and who didn't. Traditional allies rejected this outright. France said no. Germany said no. The United Kingdom said no. Italy said no. China said no. India said no. Japan said no. These countries recognized exactly what this was, an attempt to bypass existing global frameworks and consolidate power under a single private authority. Instead, the countries that lined up are states with concentrated power, weak civil protections, and leadership structures that already mirror what this board represents: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Hungary, Turkey, Belarus, Cambodia, El Salvador, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Vietnam, Morocco, Pakistan, Paraguay, Jordan, Kuwait, Albania, Azerbaijan, Kosovo, Mongolia. And then there's Russia. Vladimir Putin is being allowed to buy a seat on the Board of Peace using $1 billion in frozen assets, money seized because of the invasion of Ukraine. Those funds were never meant to be repurposed for private influence. Yet they are now being used as a buy-in to legitimize a regime responsible for mass civilian death. That alone should stop anyone in their tracks. This is one of the reasons the doomsday clock was moved to 85 seconds to midnight on January 27, 2026, the closest humanity has ever been to total annihilation. Scientists didn't make that decision based on rhetoric. They made it based on the collapse of global norms, the weakening of alliances, the rise of unchecked power centers, and the growing likelihood that conflict escalation will happen without restraint. Trump's response to dissent has been blunt and punitive. When Canada raised concerns about sovereignty and the destabilization of the rules-based order, Trump didn't negotiate. He revoked their invitation entirely. A G7 ally was discarded like a contractor who asked too many questions. This is how the Board of Peace functions: alignment over alliance, loyalty over law. The $1 billion buy-in serves another purpose as well. It funds what the board calls the International Stabilization Force. This is not a NATO unit. It does not answer to Congress. It does not require public authorization. It is a private enforcement arm that answers directly to the board's leadership. In effect, a standing force that can be deployed wherever the board deems a stability intervention is needed. This is not peacekeeping. This is privatized force projection. And Gaza is not the only target. The same framework is being applied to Cuba and Venezuela. Venezuelan oil assets were seized, with initial revenues reportedly placed into accounts in Qatar rather than returned to the Venezuelan people. The strategy is explicit: starve governments that refuse alignment, trigger collapse, then move in under the banner of rebuilding. Havana is already being discussed in the same language used for Gaza: prime waterfront, redevelopment opportunity, luxury conversion. When you combine a permanent head of power, a financial gatekeeping mechanism, and a private enforcement arm, you do not have a peace organization. You have a global syndicate. So the question has to be asked plainly: is the Board of Peace Donald Trump's dream of global dominance? Because when you step back and examine the structure, the money, and the permanence it creates, that question stops being rhetorical. A board with no term limits, no public oversight, no electoral accountability, and its own force is not a stabilizing presence. It is a parallel power structure. Why does this board feel so dangerous? Because it removes the friction that prevents catastrophe. Democracies are slow for a reason. Debate, courts, legislatures, and allies act as brakes. The Board of Peace strips those brakes away. Decisions happen behind closed doors. Membership is purchased. Dissent is punished by exclusion. Military action is framed as operational necessity instead of last resort. And once Trump leaves office, what happens inside the walls of Mar-a-Lago when he still holds all of this power? What happens when there are no voters, no courts, no institutions capable of saying no? What happens when ego, grievance, and ambition are backed by money and force? That isn't peace. That's volatility with a command structure. It sounds dangerous to Bear News Reality, and it should sound dangerous to anyone paying attention. If you like this story and you like honest, hard truth and facts and your feelings weren't hurt, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share. This is Bear News Reality.
Bear News Reality. Cut through the noise, see what's really happening. No spin, no script, just facts and fire.